Hello, welcome back to the world of wings, worms, and wonder. I'm Kelly Johnson, your Creative Nature Connection guide. And today, Happy New Year, and I have a very exciting announcement I can finally tell you. I was invited to be a Viviva Colors ambassador. And what that means is so the next few months, I am going to be able to show you all kinds of fun projects and painting things you can make using Viviva Colors paints. Now, if that name sounds familiar to you, it should, because I have a Viviva Colors co-branded Colorsheets paint set. And you might remember that it was a limited edition set, and maybe you were one of the lucky ones who was able to snag one of the Colorsheets sets. But if not, that's okay. We're going to be having giveaways and contests and updates and all kinds of fun things Viviva themed every single month. So make sure you're subscribed to my YouTube channel. Make sure you're following me on Instagram. Make sure you're following Viviva Colors on Instagram so maybe you can be one of the winners. And if not, their products are available all over the place and online. And remember, they support a women's empowerment project. All the sales go back to that. And you can check my former videos. I'll link to those where you can learn more about Viviva and what an awesome company they are. So today, this one's for you, Montessori friends, or any friends who like cartography or geography. We are adding a little bit of pizzazz to the Montessori Planosphere maps. Now, if I sound like I'm talking in a different language right now, basically, for those of you who aren't Montessori lingo fluent, that means continent maps. And in the Montessori environment, each continent is designated a color that the children learn when they are quite young, 3 years old approximately, when they start learning the names of the continents and their locations on the puzzle maps and planisphere maps. So you can see here, I've got a few of the continents with me, and you'll see me painting some of them in the video in the wet on wet technique. And that is one of my favorite easy go-to, look super cool watercolor techniques that anyone can try, because it just basically involves painting plain water and then you add your wet watercolor paint into it and you get this really awesome, like mottled, textured look, almost like, dare I say, kind of tie-dye in certain circumstances. And you can just get a lot of depth and interest. You can see here it looks a little starbursty. And I think that can be really fun when you're printing things off and you just want to add a little something extra. Now, speaking of printing things off, or even in just making anything painted white, Antarctica. We've got all these beautifully painted, textural, depth, interest continents. What about Antarctica? Viviva's got you covered with that because they have an entire line of metallic paints. So you can see here a little shimmer. I did Antarctica, and that's in the video to show y'all, using the silver shimmer with just a hint of the blue, one of the blues from the Color Pans set. And let me show you here. This is the metallic set that I used, and silver is in the back. You can see it's quite metallic. And then the Color Pans set comes in a lovely little sleeve made of cork. You see here, everything's recyclable. There's no plastic in these materials. It's fantastic. They're not only socially responsible, they're environmentally responsible as well. So I used a little bit of the shallow blue, which doesn't look so shallow here in the pan, but the shallow blue and the metallic silver to make Antarctica really shimmer like that icy wonderland it is. So there's a lot of fun to be had with watercolor painting. And there's a lot of fun to be had with Viviva paints because they're so vibrant. They're dye-based, they're handmade, like I said, by a women's empowerment initiative, and they have all the colors that we need to paint our maps in Montessori. So I'm gonna leave you now and we'll go to a painting process video, and I'll give you some tips and tricks while we're painting. So I hope you get inspired to paint your own planosphere with pizzazz. Okay, welcome to my painting table. You can see I've painted South America already, so you can see that wet on wet watery technique, and now we're going to paint Africa. You begin by simply filling in your shape, whatever that may be. I'm filling in just loosely the interior of Africa with plain water. That's always how you begin wet on wet. Plain water on dry paper. So I'm not getting real detailed. You can see I have a big brush here, and I'm just following along, not getting into every little nook and cranny, but the basic perimeter of Africa, and just really not sopping wet, but a decent amount of wetness. And here's the cool thing about wet on wet. You'll see when I start to add the paint. The paint is only going to travel wherever the paper is wet. So by leaving the perimeter edge of completely dry paper, the paint isn't going to go out of the lines. The paint will only go out of the lines if my brush goes out of the lines. So you can see the cool little starbursts and little watery technique starting to reveal itself. And what I like to say about wet on wet is let the paint do the work. It's going to do all kinds of cool things and puddle a little bit here and there, but that's okay. You'll see how we address that. But the paint has kind of a mind of its own on wet, and that's the fun of it. That's what gives the texture and the loose feeling. And if a color area is too light, you just add more paint in there. And then if it puddles, you just bend your paper around. So you can see I added paint around. I didn't paint it in solid because I knew I was going to move my page around. Now, if you get it really steep and you have a lot of water, there is a chance it might run out of the edge. But, just be reasonable when you're twisting and turning your paper. You don't get too wild with it. Now, you can see I switched to a smaller brush here, and that is what I'm using to get more detail around my edges. And the brush is just wide enough to cover the space between the edge of the perimeter and the wet area, so that what I'm painting is seamlessly blending into the area that's already wet. And I'm just going around with my small brush and filling in the details, adding more saturated paint where I want it to be darker, and letting the paint do the work. And just, going with the flow. Kind of sounds silly, but that's pretty much the gist of wet on wet technique with watercolor. And if I had wanted to, I could add other colors, other shades of green. But in this case, since we're painting the Montessori Planosphere maps, and those are usually flat colors, we're just adding a little bit of artistic textural interest to the single color shapes of the continents. And just, working with it. Working around. There's no right or wrong way to do this. It really, how it comes out is just based on the amount of water, can also be based on how much humidity is in your environment. I'm in a fairly humid environment, so mine doesn't dry very quickly. If you're in a very dry environment, you may need to add a little more water. Just going with the flow, playing around with it, and letting the paint do the work. So you can keep those two little mottos: go with the flow and let the paint do the work, in your head as you paint, and have fun with it. And you can see how children would really like this. really everyone I know likes wet on wet. You just have a lot of fun with it. It has spontaneity, but it also has control because you control it based on where you put the water originally, and then the spontaneity comes when you add the paint to the water. Now, what if you did get out of the lines? That's okay. Just take a paper towel and dab the edges, and that will pick up a lot of the paint that may have gotten out of the lines. Okay, now let's paint Antarctica. And for this, remember I said we're going to be using metallic paint mixed with a flat color pan paint. Again, we start by painting in the perimeter, just filling it in with plain clean water. I'll just say here, it's probably obvious, but just in case, when you're doing Antarctica or any whites for that matter, make sure you get clean fresh water, really rinse your cup out, and really clean your brush. Because is it the end of the world if your brush had some color on it or your water wasn't perfectly clean and a little color gets in there? No, it's not the end of the world. And hey, you could say that ice and snow and whites reflect all the colors that are around them, which is one reason why I did put a little bit of blue into the Antarctica, the white silver of Antarctica. But for the most part, let's just start fresh and start clean. And I also, you can see with Antarctica, there's the ice shelves. So I included those with dotted lines. Now, while I'm painting here with the silver, it's probably a little hard to see what I'm doing. You can kind of see the warm shimmer come in. But when I add the blue, I think it'll really be apparent how the wet on wet can really add a cool, icy, you know those really awesome videos or awesome photographs you see of these giant icebergs and giant chunks of ice in Antarctica, and they have that blue glowing through them. That was my inspiration. That's what I was going for here. But first I wanted to make sure I covered the entire continent area, filled it with the shimmer first, because I wanted the blue to go into the shimmer versus the other way around. So just getting in that loose, see, still using the big brush here. I'm not going for the details quite yet. Just getting a nice color fill. And the shimmers have such a nice, really just beautiful color and texture that you can see in person. Now, if you were going to photograph this or then print it out into a 3-part card material, it's not going to show up shimmery in your printout, obviously. But if you're painting it, if you're just painting it and enjoying that, then it will show up shimmery if you're making your own booklet at home. Now you can see I'm adding in the blue and just letting the paint do the work, letting the blue go with the flow. Also note, you can see I did not add a full saturation blue. I watered it down first because Antarctica is primarily white, and if we're looking at it on the planisphere map, it's going to be surrounded by blue ocean, and we don't want to cause any confusion with that. Like, why is Antarctica blue? Antarctica is supposed to be white, or if it's blending in with the ocean. It's just enough subtle light or shallow blue to add depth and interest and help Antarctica to show up a little bit more if we're on white paper. I'm using the tiny brush to go around the edges, because if you think about it, if the ice is next to clear, cold blue water, that blue water is going to reflect through and into the ice. And that's why I added a little extra blue in the ice shelves also. You know, if it gets a little dark, then you just add in some more silver shimmer. You could also use that same dabbing technique we talked about. If you got some paint that got out of the lines, you can take a paper towel and dab it off. If you find you have a puddle of paint inside your continent perimeter or whatever you're painting, you can always dab that as well. Just take some paint out and then you can add more water or let it dry a little bit or add more paint. You know, if you don't like it, dab it. It may not remove everything, but it will lighten things up. It'll dry things up if they've gotten a little soppy. So yeah, you can see here Antarctica's got a little texture, got a little depth. The blue adds the depth, the silver adds the icy shine, and it adds just a little something extra to the plain white continent, which the alternative would just be an outline. So I hope you're have fun with this, get some good ideas, and enjoy Planospheres with Pizazz. Welcome back. See, that doesn't look so hard, does it? I just traced the continents off a regular map, simplified the edges a little bit, just lightly in pencil, taped to a window. You don't even need a light box. I'm telling you, art can just be so fun and so simple. It doesn't have to be taken so seriously, and it can still come out looking so cool, so beautiful, so much interest. Children would love doing this. Children can totally do the wet on wet technique and come out with some really cool final products. Not that product is our goal, process is our goal, right? But they can still come out with some pretty awesome looking art. So just to recap, in this project, I used the Viviva Colorsheets metallic set, and I used the Viviva Watercolor Pans set to paint my Planospheres with Pizazz. So I hope you're inspired to paint your own maps, to just get painting, get out there in nature. You can see how easy and it is. Like, these are so lightweight, like light as a feather. You could keep them in your bag all the time if you wanted to. So I hope that you're as inspired as I am. Be sure to check the caption below if you want to get a discount or check out the Viviva paints. And if you have any questions about painting, the wet on wet technique, watercolor technique, you can check some of my other YouTube videos or pop me a question and I can send you a link. I hope you have a great day. Get out there, creatively connect with nature, and I'll see you back in the world of wings, worms, and wonder soon.